All right, so I want to continue the discussion about walking a little bit. And in particular, we're going to zero in on some of the lateral forces and lateral strains that happen in the pelvis during walking. Now, this doesn't just apply to walking, this applies to all sorts of things. Anytime there's a lateral strain, walking is just a really great medium to kind of take a look at some of the factors involved. So, here we have a pelvis, and attached to this pelvis are muscles. Um, so here we've got, whether that's the tensor fasciae lata or gluteus medius that attaches all kind of along that line, or the gluteus minimus that attaches a little closer. Depending on the fibers, and each fiber controls a slightly different vector. Fibers of any of them and more things are going to be involved, but we'll just kind of leave it there. So when we walk, and as I'm fond of saying, there's many ways to walk, but there's a little bit of a lateral translation on the pelvis generally. Now this can show up in different ways. The wider your feet are, the more translation has to happen. The wider your hips are, the more translation has to happen in order to minimize mechanical strain. So it's not the only walking pattern, but it's a very, very common solution to the problem of what do we do with our center of mass. Now, so if we picture, let's call this gluteus medius, or one of the fibers from it. If you step down onto my left side, then my center of mass is going to shift over to the left, and that gluteus medius needs to function in an eccentric contraction. That's the weight-bearing leg. It still has to hold my body up, but it has to allow for my pelvis to come closer to being directly over my standing foot. That gives a mechanical advantage. This happens to greater and lesser degrees, but if this is too weak and I step over, then it just starts to flop. That's a dysfunction that's seen. But if it doesn't let go and I step over, instead of doing that, it'll just bring the whole pelvis with it, so that now my center of mass is over the left leg, but my pelvis is tilted. And so sometimes you may see the whole torso stay tilted, or you may see a scoliosis begin to happen in the lower back in order to rectify the body with the line of gravity. So let's just take a look at one of the possible patterns, and this is something we see a lot. If this gluteus medius doesn't let go and it brings the pelvis with it, then often what happens is the strain goes to the next joint up, which is the sacroilliac joint. So every time you step on my left leg, if that gluteus medius or tensor fasciae lata or gluteus minimus or any of those lateral control vectors aren't letting go and controlling as they release, if they're gripping on for dear life, then that strain goes directly up to the sacroiliac joint. The sacroiliac joint is tight, or the muscles around controlling the next opening of that joint are tight, then the whole pelvis shifts with it. But this is a very, very common pattern we see when these lateral stabilizers don't release properly. And so that's hopefully clarifies a little of the mystery of why do the gluteus medius and minimus, sacroiliac joint issues, quadratus lumborum issues, why do they tend to go together? Well, that's one of the reasons. So thanks for listening. Hope that helps, and I'll talk to you soon.